Hi, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead, and I'm sure glad you're here with me tonight. I'm going to continue reading this story. It's The Legend of the White Raccoon by Lee Roddy. It's part of the DJ Dillon Adventure series. I wanted to let you know tomorrow I am starting a new YouTube channel. It will be particularly for storytelling. Children, the young at heart, and everybody's stories. Or maybe it will be just children and the young at heart, I think, actually. So, I hope you will check that out. It's called Maria Tells a Story. I'll try to put a link on it for tomorrow. But I'm going to finish off at least this book on this channel, but probably the entire series. So I'm on book 6 out of 10. So anyhow, that's enough of that, and let's start the story. So yesterday, the chapter was Kathy challenges DJ, but it all worked out good. DJ knows what he's going to do if he catches that white raccoon. That is, if there really is such a creature. Chapter 4. Danger from a Poacher's Trap. DJ and Alfred chose to explore a little before deciding how to best trap the white raccoon, if it was real. By early evening, the boys were already scrambling down the steep trail into the remote wilderness area of Devil's Slide Canyon. Mad River ran along the canyon bottom. The autumn wind was sharp that night. It seemed to slice through the heavy old woolen jacket the DJ wore. But the excitement of hunting the white raccoon kept DJ's blood flowing. He felt warm. His dog, Hero, was anxious to be off the leash and hunting. The scruffy Mud and Alfred's hound, Bugler, had come in on their own after the boys had been run off out of the canyon by Durant Skeever. Now, Hero sniffed loudly, testing the night air. He pulled so hard against his chain leash that he sometimes gasped. You know, they can kind of choke themselves. If you wouldn't pull so hard, you wouldn't choke yourself, DJ scolded. Now, come back here at the proper heel position. Heel, I say. He jerked sharply on the leash. The dog reluctantly obeyed. Hero was what bear hunters called a hair puller, cross-cut, or a heeler. Big game like bears are trailed by hounds, like Bugler, a black and tan, that follow a scent trail. When the game is treed or brought to bay by the hounds, the crossbreed hair puller is turned loose. He instinctively goes for the prey's hindquarters. That's their back end. Hounds tend to go for the quarry's forequarters, where it's more dangerous, because if they're going up front, there's claws, there's mouth, all sorts of dangerous stuff up there. By having hounds and dogs working at both ends of the prey, the animals are less likely to get hurt. At least the dogs are. While a raccoon is a relatively small animal, he's a powerful fighter that sometimes can even kill a dog. DJ and Alfred didn't intend to have their dogs attacked by the white raccoon, but that didn't mean the animal might not defend itself against the dogs. This thing's poking me in the head. There. Hero was half hound, part Australian Shepherd, and 1/4 Airedale. He was reddish-brown with shaggy hair and a stub tail. He had a long, funny black nose that stuck out from his muzzle like a plum on a thumb. Alfred was also having trouble controlling his Black and Tan hound. Bugler had come to the Mulford home as a skinny stray with very sore pads on his feet. At first, Alfred had called the hound Blackie, but after the experiences with the ghost dog of Stony Ridge, Alfred changed his name to Bugler. Bugler was a loner, a hound that wouldn't run a trail with another dog. Once Bugler had struck a scent and was closing in on the game, he would let other dogs join him for the final chase and baying tree. DJ glanced at the sky. The moon was high above the canyon walls, seeming to touch the very tip of the 15-story tall sugar pine. That's a mighty tall tree. The glowing moon looked like a lighted ornament on a Christmas tree. "You scared, DJ?" Alfred asked, pulling his stocking cap down further over his ears. "Why should I be scared?" "You know, that guy, Sky, threatened us last night. He could be hiding out here waiting for us." "He could, but I doubt it. This area of the river belongs to the government, so anybody can use it. That guy don't got no right running us off. I don't think he cares very much about rights. Sky never let that boy go to school, at least not to Stony Ridge, and I doubt he goes to the Indian Springs school either." Alfred stopped and used his right thumb to push up his thick glasses farther up his nose. "You suppose there are any bears around here?" "The mountains are full of them, but they're not close or the dogs would have smelled them." Yeah, you're right. Say, isn't this about where we saw that new kid last night?" DJ flashed his light around the area. "Sure is. There's the tree he said the white raccoon was in." Alfred bent over his hound's head. "Let's turn Bugler loose and see if he picks up that coon's trail." The flop-eared Black and Tan was soon smashing through the underbrush, sniffing loudly. The boys kept their flashlights on Bugler. His heavy tail swung noisily against the brush. Suddenly, the hound stopped dead still. At the same instant, Hero tensed on his leash. DJ and Alfred stopped in their tracks, flashing their lights in the directions the dogs were looking. Whatever the dogs saw seemed to be hidden in the darkness just beyond the ponderosa trunk that had crashed in the windstorm. DJ heard something move in the brush beyond the log. Hero heard it too. He barked suddenly and sharply. For such a little dog, he had the loudest bark DJ had ever heard. "Something's moving over there. What do you think it is, DJ?" Alfred asked, holding the light on the branch of the fallen tree. "Let's go find out, Alfred." His friend groaned. "Ooh, I was afraid you'd say that." "Well, it's not a bear or a mountain lion or anything like that," DJ answered. "See? The dogs have lost their interest." "Must be trash," Alfred agreed. He meant deer, coyote, or other animals that weren't hunted with dogs. Cautiously, the boys moved ahead, still holding Hero's leash. Bugler moved off into the night, cutting back and forth in the brush, smelling for a game scent. As the boys carefully peered over the big log, a pair of eyes suddenly shone in their flashlights. "There!" DJ cried, "close to the ground." "A deer?" Alfred exclaimed. He let his breath out so hard it made a white puff in the crisp night air. "Why is she just laying there on her side like that? Why doesn't she run?" A moment later the boys saw the answer. The doe was nearly strangled to death from a noose around her slender neck. "A poacher," DJ exclaimed. "Somebody set a snare. That's against the law. Come on, let's see if we can free her." Hero trotted up and sniffed the stricken deer. She struggled violently, choking and gasping. The snare was made to pull tighter with every move the animal made. DJ ordered his dog away from the suffering deer. "Hurry," DJ cried, pulling off his heavy coat. "Maybe we can still save her." He came up from behind, away from her tiny, thrashing black hooves. They could slice a person's flesh to ribbons. They are really sharp, I can tell you that. We had a little deer that its mother had got hit for a while, and that deer loved to eat fruit. And one day when I was feeding it, it got its little feet up in the air, and it cut through my new dress just as fast as you could imagine. Those little hooves are sharp. DJ threw his jacket over the female's front hooves. Alfred did the same with the hind feet. The deer was gasping weakly for air as DJ bent over her shoulder, while Alfred tried to keep the coats on the animal's legs. DJ set his light on the ground so he could use both hands to loosen the killing noose. He got it loosened enough so the animal's terrible gasping sound stopped. She was too weak to move. She noisily sucked air into her lungs. In another moment, DJ worked the snare over the nearly dead animal's head. There! DJ threw the noose free. It sailed away into a thin, silvery arc and vanished into the night. DJ grabbed his coat from her hooves and jumped back. "Get clear. Let's see if she's able to get up." Alfred retrieved his coat and leapt back. Both boys held their flashlight on the doe. For a moment, the exhausted animal lay on her side, breathing hard. Getting back the breath the strong snare had cut off. Then, with a toss of her dainty head, the doe struggled to her feet. She stood uncertainly, swaying on widespread feet. Her soft eyes rolled wildly as she watched the boys. Then her long ears shot up and she staggered weakly into the underbrush. "Good girl," DJ called after her. Alfred used his flashlight to find the noose. Then he walked into the forest where the snare lay coiled in the underbrush. He examined it with his light. "Piano wire, maybe," he said softly. "The other end's tied around that log. Who'd be mean enough to do a thing like that?" DJ looked at his friend. Through the soft glow of their flashlights, both knew the answer. "That man we met last night," DJ exclaimed softly. "Not the boy, but Sky." Alfred worked the other end of the snare loose from the tree trunk. "That's a terrible way for an animal to die." "Sure is," DJ agreed. "That wire's strong enough to catch a person, too." He flashed his light around, then stopped it abruptly. "Oh no, there's another snare over there." The light reflected off a thin strand of silver-colored wire. The one end was attached to a young ponderosa pine that had been bent nearly double. The other end wasn't visible in the fallen leaves and needles. "Keep Hero away," DJ said. "I'll spring this trap." He picked up a 4-foot length of fallen limb from a downed ponderosa. DJ dragged the end of the limb across the leaves where he figured the set was hidden. The limb was suddenly jerked from his hand. The supple young pine snapped upright. The piece of dead limb bounced crazily in the air from the end of the piano wire snare. "Wow!" Alfred exclaimed. If one of us had stepped in that thing, we'd be hanging upside down in the air right now. DJ agreed. If somebody was alone out here and stepped in that thing, he would die. Alfred glanced around fearfully. Let's get out of here. There may be other traps. DJ hesitated. If we do that, we'll never find the white raccoon. Let me get these snares to take with us. Then let's go on. But let's be mighty careful where we step. Alfred sighed. I should have known you'd say that. Whoops! Bugler struck a trail. DJ felt his blood quicken. From a distance, Bugler began baying. Hunters said he was a pappy hound, strike dog, or a cold nose. That meant he could smell a scent long after a bear or mountain lion, bobcat, raccoon, or any other game had passed. But what made Bugler special was that he was a rare ball-mouth hound. That's what hunters call a hound, with such an unusual baying cry that it stirred the emotions of anyone who ever followed hounds on a frosty night. Excuse me, I gotta move this just a little bit. DJ listened a moment. Sounding like it's a hot trail. Maybe it's the white raccoon. I'll turn Hero loose now. The scruffy mutt strained against his lead until DJ freed him. Then Hero dashed off in the night, trailing his sharp, chopping bark behind him. Alfred asked, if it is the white raccoon and they treat him, should we just mark the tree and come back with our box trap tomorrow night? No sense dragging that trap around until we know where to set it. Knowing the one tree from last night won't be enough to mark the ringtail's territory. Alfred asked, want to run after them or sit there and stay until they've bayed whatever it is? Let's sit and listen a while. Tell me what you learned about raccoons from your encyclopedias. The boys moved closer to the river where there was less gravel and less brush. Hero and Bugler's voices echoing in the canyon walls. DJ sat down on a big boulder that had been smoothed by countless years of spring snow runoffs feeding into the Mad River. Alfred scrunched down under another large boulder that protected him from the biting wind. One thing we forgot about, DJ. What's that? If that mean man, Sky, whatever his name is around here, he's sure to hear those dogs. He might come looking for us. It's a free country. We've got a right to be here. Now tell me what you found out. Well, let's see. Raccoons are about 3 feet long, counting their tails. They're nocturnal and omnivorous. DJ nodded. Okay, coons come out mostly at night and they'll eat about anything. What else? They're arboreal, live in trees, and of course they have the black mask around their eyes. DJ nodded, looking at the moon. It was casting shadows from a black oak tree's limbs. The wind had blown all the leaves down. The limbs made little shadows like bars across Alfred's face. Something moved in the brush behind the boys. They spun around, flashing their lights. A tiny pair of eyes peered brightly at them. A small black animal with white stripes stood in the lights. Skunk? Alfred whispered. DJ whispered back, don't move. Just sit real still. It's okay, unless he goes up on his front legs to warn us he might spray. If he makes one move like that, I'm gone. The boys waited quietly, watching the skunk. He looked back at them with small, bright eyes for a moment, but didn't seem alarmed. He waddled off, dragging his oily-looking tail. It left marks in the dust. DJ snapped his light off. If it's true that raccoons always wash their food before they eat it, is it? Alfred's light followed the skunk until its black and white fur was lost in the underbrush. He turned off his flashlight. Moonlight flooded the area again. Not really. That's kind of a legend. Oh, something else. Raccoons have very, very sensitive fingers, like hands. They can feel underwater for food and catch it without seeing it. Well, I wish we'd see that white one sitting on a big old tree branch with the moon behind it. Wouldn't that be a sight to see? Alfred agreed. Would be nice, but I'm more interested in not see that sky man we met last night. He won't like it if he finds out we let that deer go and took 2 of his snares. Listen, DJ said, stiffening his body. Both boys sat motionless, hearing the gurgle of the river and the dogs working the hot trail. Finally, Alfred whispered, "What did you hear?" DJ shook his head and let out his breath. Nothing, I guess." He lowered his chin into the collar of the coat to keep warm. A sudden crashing sound made both boys swivel around and look up the mountainside away from the river. Something was smashing through the brush with such speed and power. It was crushing everything in its path. "A bear!" Alfred cried, leaping to his feet. "Run, DJ! Run!" Wow. That's a problem. The dogs aren't there. Well, that's the end of the chapter tonight. So I'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll be reading chapter 5. I hope you enjoy this story, and I hope you'll check out my new YouTube channel, Maria Tells a Story. All right, I love you, I really do. But more importantly, God loves you, and He always will. I want you to always remember to keep dreaming and have an adventure in your heart. Okay, good night.